So basically, I would be starting with what do we mean by GMO? So GMO is basically a genetically modified organism, is an animal, plant, or any organism whose DNA has been altered using genetic engineering techniques. So for thousands of years, humans have used breeding methods to modify organisms. Corn, cattle, and even dogs nowadays. If you have seen the videos of Siberian Husky and another German Shepherd becoming one dog, so we have been using those things and it has been going on for generations now so that we can get the desired traits. Within the last few decades, the modern advances in biotechnology have allowed scientists to directly modify the DNA of such organisms. So, moreover, selective breeding and crossbreeding often produce mixed results with unwanted traits as well and wanted traits as well. So this specific target modification of DNA, which is using biotechnology, has allowed scientists to avoid this problem and improve the genetic makeup of the organism without the unwanted characteristics being present. So basically, this is a picture of how it is done. Like the tomato is being injected with some desired traits or something like that. So when we talk about the abstract, so the transgenic crops are currently being cultivated all around the world at a very high scale, and assessment of their impact on the environment are conducted before they are approved for commercial use as of now, and they have been required for the regulatory biosafety frameworks. In this view, we discuss the potential ecological consequences of the commercial use in agriculture of genetically modified insect-resistant crops. Like in 12th, also we have, most of us have heard about BT cotton. So basically, that is also an insect-resistant crop. We also discuss the impacts caused by the change in agriculture practice and attempt to identify the gaps and possible opportunities for research concerning this new technological tool. So now we would be talking about the market of GM plants. So the market of the global area of genetically modified plants reached 52.6 million hectares in 2001. Transgenic plants expressing Bt cottons conferred resistance against insects were tested in the field in at least 18 crops. However, only corn, cotton, and potato are commercially available. In the United States, pest-resistant transgenic crops have been cultivated in large areas since 1996. In 2001, approximately 13 million hectares were cultivated with Bt cotton and Bt corn, mainly in US and Canada. Bt crops are also being cultivated in China, India, South Africa, Argentina, and the most expansion we have seen is in China. Consequently, some experience is being accumulated on the commercial use of insect-resistant transgenic crops. Now, I would like to share with you a graph on the same. This is the graph. Basically, this is from 2019 till 2027. Uh, so in 2019, no, like the blue shows North America, the light blue, the dark blue shows South America, Middle East and Africa is yellow, Asia Pacific is gray, and orange is Europe. So basically, this shows a trend of how like globally genetic modified plants, their food market is how much, and how it keeps on increasing every year. So now I would like to take a small interval, and I would like to ask if someone like wants to talk regarding the same or say something on the same.
Aryan, are you saying something? Okay, Parth Sarthi says that I'd like to say that very few GMO food crops are available in India. Yep. You guys can unmute right now so we can have a
Can I
little interaction here.
can I ask a question?
Sure, sure. If you want to share anything, that also. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I would just wanted to know what is the source of the prediction that you have made that the speaker has made in this graph. I mean, what is the source of prediction? Yeah, in 2019, you can see that the graph for North America is quite high. 2022, then how are they predicting that it will go higher upon? Even though there has been protest against GMOs in America and there has been some backlashes they are facing in the general public because of the GMO plants, they are completely against that. How are they expecting that North America would go again in favor of GMO?
So
Pretty
basically, I would
independent.
like to answer this as see, in if we talk about America right now, North America and South America both, they have already devoted a lot of land to it. So there's no coming back from that. So they have to use the land for this purpose itself. And yes, there are restrictions in America. There's been going a very big protest on the same. But if we look at it very closely, the WHO has said that North America would still be into this GMO thing, and they would still be producing genetically modified crops and stuff like that. When we see the other parts like Europe, Asia, Pacific, and Middle East, Africa, there would be a sudden rise in it. And I have got this from WHO and one more Maximize. There's this uh, organization. I've got the data from there.
How,
I'll just like to add a few points to what Parvi said. So, in countries like the US, obviously there's a clique of people that believe that GMO crops are bad for your health and you should not consume GMO products. But that's a very those people are very focused. It's a very small number of people, I'd say. Uh, Plus, the US, it's people in the US are much more open to accepting new technologies. So, GMO food crops, plant-based meat, cultured meat, that sort of thing. They are actually very open to that. And from what Parvi said just now, yes, this seems to be independent research by Maximize Market Research Private Limited. So there you go. That's the source of the research.
okay, thank
So I can also like I want to add a point. So in next year, Florida has approved that they'll be releasing millions of GM mosquitoes to eliminate malaria. I think if I remember correctly. So that has been approved. So they'll be doing it next year.
There's something in the chat box as well. So, Porvi, you can look into it.
Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, can you just say that because I cannot see the chat.
Okay, just a second. Yeah, so Swapna. Yeah, Muskan, go ahead.
Yeah, how was the prediction made that in North America and Asia Pacific, the market has suddenly dipped in just 1 year from
Ma'am,
2020 to 2027?
yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. That is because of the reason that there is, see, as the other sir, I guess Abhay sir said, that there is a little amount of opposition going on. They are not ready to accept it, a lot of them. So there we can see a decline. There is a chance of decline. This is not the correct data exactly. This is just a prediction which has been made.
Excuse me, Corvi. I'm not a sir. I'm also a first year undergraduate.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll read out the chat box to you guys. So Swapna says that I'd like to say that it's partially because of societal norms and people's outlook. BT cotton is abundant because people don't consume, but there was a lot of backlash for BT brinjal, even though many people claimed it to be much better in taste and produce. Yeah, exactly.
I remember that.
And
There
Siddharth.
were a lot.
Okay, we'll
There
take
were
the
a lot
question
of
later.
GMO. There were a lot of genetically modified plants, which were like cultivated, but they did not. There were a lot of risks and threats related to it, due to which they had been told not to be cultivated anymore. They had been barred.
Yep. And we have two questions, so we can take them right now. Is that fine for you?
Yes, ma'am. It's absolutely fine.
So the first question is, can the failed tomato be considered a GMO?
Can the failed tomato? Yeah, it is a GMO. It was genetically modified, but it did not, like, it had a lot. It did not like, it was not desirable. Like, it was not too good, and it was not being cultivated anymore. So, like, I remember tomato was potato and tomatoes mixture. It had been genetically made. It had the whole procedure, PCR and everything was done in it. But at last, it was said that it would not be used anymore. Like, it would not be cultivated at a large scale. Large scale.
I would like to add on it the tomato thing.
Yeah,
Can
go
I?
ahead. Yeah, sure,
Uh,
definitely.
it was found statistically that the produce it was going on the amount per acre was very low as compared to what the usual and the normal potato and tomato and per acre area. So that's why it was actually uh, left out to never seen again. It was not that it was bad or something. The production was not that high.
So the production was not feasible enough, was it?
It wasn't giving a amount that was required per unit area that it was thought to be.
Oh, I
I
see.
mean, they actually wanted to reduce the area where both of them can be grown at a single point, like for potato and tomato. And in the whole, let's say an acre of land, we are growing tomatoes, having potato and tomatoes. And let's say another area, we have 1 acre of land, having half an acre of potato and half an acre of tomato. And then when we compare both of the fields, then there is a very vast difference between the produced amount in the normal areas as compared to the tomato.
I think we can continue with Porvi's webinar and we'll take the rest of the questions later. But before that, can we have all the cameras on and just have a screenshot since all of us have gathered here today? Come on, guys, we are waiting. Turn on your cameras. Okay, so I'll click it then. At the count of 1, okay? So you guys can make your poses. 3, 2, 1. Done. Okay, Porvi, let's continue then.
Sure. So the next topic which we have is protecting plants from pests. So there were risks and benefits to this as well. So plant breeders attempt to minimize the impact of crop pests by breeding plants resistant to the attacks of pests. So these breeders use the natural plant genetic variation and induce mutations in it to select the desirable traits and introduce them into cultivated plants. It was done by using a combination of classical and modern plant breeding methods. To make crop plants resistant to the attack of insects and diseases, breeders have relied on the chemical defenses of plants. Plants produce a variety of antimicrobial and insecticidal or defensive substances that provide protection against pests. So these are the secondary plant metabolites that include phenolics and steroids, etc. So traditional breeding to alter the plant's chemical composition to intoxicate target herbivores is achieved through the transfer or exchange of the desired traits among sexually compatible, that is related, plant species which share genomes that are largely homologous. On the other hand, molecular breeding through genetic engineering can use genes and gene constructs which are derived from completely unrelated organisms and add them to the existing genome in an entirely novel genetic context. The added novel gene construct contains not only a desired trait but also marker genes, promoters, and terminators. So, as Abhay had said earlier, that the there was this question on pomato. So, pomato was also one of those which had which was not homologous. It was completely derived. It was completely unrelated organism, and they had used their existing genome and made a new one, so that the desired traits were also there, and the marker genes, promoters, and terminators, everything was present in it. So the greater diversity of genes that can be transferred by genetic engineering methods, their enhanced effectiveness, and the ability to insert the same gene into many cultivated species have led to concerns about transgenic crops. Some transgenic breeding result in pest protective traits that are phenotypically indistinguishable from those conferred by traditional breeding methods. In addition, transgenic methods are based on a more complete knowledge of the genes that are being transferred into cultivated plants. There are cases, however, when transgenic pest protection traits may result in plants having new phenotypes that could affect human or animal health, non-target organisms, or the weediness of crop relatives. Transgenic methods can also introduce extraneous traits which, when they involve into marker genes, such as the antibiotic resistant genes. These are concerns that are taken into consideration by the biosafety regulatory process before transgenic varieties are commercialized. So the biosafety regulatory is mostly taken by WHO. The perceived disadvantage which have been seen from the genetically modified crops may be grouped into 5 categories: potential impact on non-target species, potential for increased weediness, increase in toxin levels in the soil, exchange of genetic materials between the transgenic crop and related plant species, and selection for resistance among populations of the target species. There is one more, that some GMO, they have this quality, that this disadvantage, that they can affect the human species as well. So transgenic strategies which have been seen for plant protection include insecticidal toxins from BT. During sporulation, BT produces crystalline inclusions that are protoxins, which these are cryproteins. These are also known as cryproteins, which when ingested by the insect, they bind into specific glycoprotein receptors on the surface of cells lining the gut of the organism, causing an imbalance in iron concentration, destroying the cells and resulting in the death of the insect. In addition, some strains of BT produce vegetative insecticidal proteins before sporulation. So, in the case of BT, what we had seen is, when the cells are destroyed, they make holes in it, holes through it, due to which the insect dies. Since 1942, when one of the scientists demonstrated the potential of the bacterium for pest control, the use of BT formulations increased as bioinsecticides because of its safety. It was harmless to vertebrates and other non-target fauna, and because of the specificity of each cryprotein, which infects only a narrow range of hosts. However, instability and degradation of cry proteins when exposed to UV radiation, and short persistence on the plant have constrained large adoption of Bt pesticides by farmers. So next we have inhibitors of insect digestive enzymes. So these digestive enzymes are mostly proteases. There are 4 classes of protease inhibitors based on their specificity, which are serine, cysteine, metallo, and uh, aspartyls proteases. All are small proteins that bind to the insect's digestive enzymes, producing an inactive complex that prevents the absorption of amino acid, leading to nutrient starvation. Consequently, these inhibitors induce death or reduction in larval growth. The protease inhibitors can also induce the overexpression of digestive enzymes affecting larval growth. Serine proteins inhibitors have activity sites which inhibit trypsin and chymotrypsin and are effective antimetabolites against Lepidoptera and Diptera. A successful case is the cysteine protease inhibitor gene introduced into popular and to protect the plant against beetles. Inhibitors of insect digestive enzymes are plants extensively produce proteins which with anti-metabolic activity against diverse digestive enzymes of herbivores. These proteins have either a role as part of defense strategy against herbivores or for preserving stored nutrients as proteins and carbohydrates. Genes encoding these proteins are a valuable source to enhance resistance of plant against insects and could be used in plant breeding programs. So as we talked about Lepidoptera, so we're going to talk about the non-target, which is Lepidoptera. So many species of Lepidoptera, both target and non-target, are likely to be directly susceptible to the Bt toxin. Studies on the ecological interactions of Bt insecticide sprays have documented some effects on non-target organisms. So, Bt sprays can affect non-target Lepidoptera from up to 30 days after spraying. Furthermore, a reduction in Lepidoptera species richness was found 2 years after forest plots were sprayed with Bt. So this is a picture of Lepidoptera. It is basically a butterfly. Now, if we talk about non-target effects of insect resistance, which we have seen in Lepidoptera, it is basically non-target effects are any undesirable effects on insect-resistant GM plants on friendly organisms, like bees, for example, in the environment. Non-target organisms include natural enemies, pollinators, and other non-target herbivores that feed on the surrounding vegetation and might be affected. So effect on natural enemies we can talk about. Despite their apparent simplicity, agriculture system consists of organisms that interact in food webs. So in the last 20 years, the effect of host plants on higher trophic level organisms such as parasitoids and predators has been studies. Most of the published papers have demonstrated that difference in plant traits may affect natural enemies directly. The plants are a source of water or nutrition for many species of parasitoids and predators that feed on floral or extrafloral nectar, pollen, or the plant sap. Consequently, changes in plant quality may affect the food source of those species. Alternatively, plant-resistant traits may indirectly affect the population of natural enemies by severely depleting their supply of prey or host, such as the bees. So transgenic crops have been rapidly adopted by growers, and the global area devoted to transgenic crops increased from 4.3 million acres in 1996 to 69.5 million acres in 1998. In the United States, where most transgenic crops are grown, herbicide-resistant soybeans are the transgenic variants that have been most broadly adopted, and insect-resistant corn is ranked second in terms of percentage of acreage planted. In all transgenic varieties accounted for 69% of US cotton, 68% of US soybean acreage, and 26% of US corn acreage in 2001. In the mid 1990s, US farmers who adopted transgenic crops enjoyed significantly increased yields and were able to reduce use of synthetic herbicide and insecticide respectively, due to which a lot of money was saved by them. Now, if we talk about the potential environmental risk of transgenic crops, which is a very big topic nowadays, genetically engineered crops will likely offer many valuable benefits, which, on the other hand, transgenic crops could also pose significant risk for the environment. Two major potential problems for the environment include the creation of new weeds and harmful effect on non-target species. Till date, these concerns remain largely theoretical, but this fact should not lure into the sense of complacency. Genetically modified crops have been planted on a commercial scale for a fairly short time, and it is anticipated that many of the potential problems could only become apparent after many years. This is basically a comparison between the benefits and the risk of GMO, and I would like you all to go through it once. I guess all of you might have read about it. So let's go for the change in persistence or invasiveness of the crop. So one of the questions which is most frequently raised is how the long-term performance of an insect-resistant GM crop can be predicted. So studies on the comparison between transgenic and non-transgenic crops also consider that any additional genetic material which provides a benefit will also carry a metabolic cost. The genetic baggage hypothesis predicts that in the absence of selection pressure, which causes the transgenic plant to be favored, the additional cost of metabolizing the detoxifier could cause the transgenic to be less competitive than the wild type. So now we'll be coming to the conclusion. So transgenic crops will not single-handedly end world hunger. We are already aware of this. Neither will transgenic crop become Frankensteinian monsters that can take over the whole world. Careful analysis of the potential risks or purported benefits can help mute the hyperbole of the biotechnology debate. Fortunately, scientific risk assessment is already required or soon to be required in many countries, including US, the European Union, Canada, Japan, and Australia. Scientists have an important responsibility to contribute and participate in these risk analysis. So basically, there's one more point, which is politicians and government agencies. So the politician and government agencies can require the risk analysis, but only scientists can ensure that the studies are credible. In particular, many of the studies that are currently performed in compliance with US regulations are scientifically weak. Poorly designed tests of safety with few replicates per treatment run a high risk of missing real effects of the transgenic crop. The standards for risk assessment studies must be clarified and elevated, and details of experimental protocols and reasonable sample sizes should be specified. There will always be conflict about technology and its use. We have already seen this. Risk analysis cannot eliminate this conflict, but it can clearly show all that portrayals of a technology as all bad or all good cannot stand up in the light of this scrutiny. Right. So clearly we must weigh the benefits that certain transgenic variants could have for human health, especially in developing nations, against the environmental harm that could result from these same or other transgenic variants. This is not a trivial challenge, particularly because the perceived benefits are often more clearly defined than the perceived risks, although risk analysis is often viewed as restrictive to technology. Well-designed risk analysis applied to transgenic plants should give us more information about how those cultivators perform under a wide variety of conditions, and such knowledge ought to be of more use and to the industry as to the regulators. So basically, the conclusion in one line can be this, that the politician and government, they show themselves as they know the best about this, but the scientists have to be involved in the same, and the scientists have to give their views on the same. And it's not all bad or all good. There are a lot of risks, whereas the risks are not being portrayed so much. The benefits are being portrayed more, and this cannot definitely decrease the hunger, the world hunger, but it can significantly contribute in the same. Thank you.
So we can begin with the Q&A space now. You guys can unmute and ask your questions, or you can type it in the chat box as well. Till then, we have a few questions in the chat box, so we'll take them up. So Siddharth asked, isn't basmati variant of rice is... Yeah, he says, isn't basmati variant of rice also GMO?
I'm not 100% sure about it, but as far as I have read, it is, and I'm not like, I cannot give you a clear picture on that. The maximum I had read about basmati was the biopiracy. So I guess yes, it has been genetically modified, and it was done by Indians, but the US took the whole thing.
Yeah, something like that happened. Even I read.
I read it in 12th last year. So
Yeah, I think it was there in our syllabus. And okay, we have another question. What are the side effects of GMO on human beings?
So basically, there are some genetically modified crops which we're not aware of so much, but there are, like, supposedly we have seen BT cotton. So there was this alkaline medium where it worked, but there is a possibility that we have genetically engineered such products as well, which can basically harm us. So supposingly you are going and you're having a different kind of food that you think, okay, this is very good, but you get to know that it is harming your body in a different way. Like you might have like there was this one which I read about. So there was this crop, I don't remember which was it, but it was being cultivated on a very large scale at some point of time, but it resulted in hair loss of the human being. So whoever had that had a tendency of losing hair. Can we move on to the next question, ma'am?
Yeah. So I'll move on to the next question. Before that, we were discussing about basmati rice. So Swapna says that I think that was the Sona strain of rice and another strain of wheat, which was GMO but not basmati in itself. And she says she doesn't exactly know, she's not so sure about it, but something like this.
There were actually two or three different wheat variants as well as 2 or 3 different rice variants which have been genetically modified till now. Like wheat, there was this rust so that they won't get rust and stuff like that. There was a different variant for that as well. It had been changed. Like there have been many incidents where rice and wheat had been genetically modified.
Yeah. Okay, so moving to the next question. Guneet is asking, are genetically modified foods accessed differently than traditional foods?
Yes, genetically modified foods are accessed differently from traditional foods because the testing is done differently. According to WHO, if we go through their website, it is clearly mentioned in it that the GMOs are the GM foods are tested differently, they are accessed differently from the traditional foods.
Okay, so Bhupesh asks, increased toxin levels in the soil, ain't it the major drawback?
Yeah, it is one of the major drawbacks. Like if the toxicity, just imagine the toxicity has increased in the soil. Now, supposing there's a rainfall happening in the same area, the same toxins are gonna travel to lakes, ponds, in there, and then it is gonna the fish is also gonna have those toxins. They might die of it, or else we are gonna eat it, and we are also gonna have the same problem. We are gonna have those toxins in our body.
Yep, I hope that answered your question. Okay, moving to the next question. Can you give examples of genetically modified plants or animals? I don't know. Guneet, what's the complete question? I think you missed on one word. The question is, can you give examples of genetically modified dash that is currently in use? So you can tell about both plants and
I
animals.
got it. I got it. You might be wanna knowing about the organism, crop, and everything. So if we talk about crops, it is like we can see corn, BT corn. Then we can see wheat. We can see rice. And if we talk about organisms, then I'm not too sure about organisms at the moment. And yeah, corona is not one of them, but you never know.
Okay, so Abhay is asking, do scientists have to convince others about profit of GMO?
Yes, they need to, because like they have to tell now that, see, what is the work of scientists? First they have to research, first they have to do the whole genetic thing, and then they have to research, and then okay, they have to research, and then they have to tell about the benefits. They need to make sure that the people are known about the benefit. Many a times the government and the policymakers, what they do is, or the WHO for example, what they do is they only show you that what are the benefits, they do not tell you the risk or the threats behind them.
Yeah, most of the time that happens because if they do, then how are they gonna put it in the market?
पैसा कैसे मिलेगा यार?
Yeah. Okay, moving to the next question. Done with this. Yeah. So, why are there very few genetically modified crops present in India?
Why are there maybe because we are not very susceptible to changes. We are not ready to have those changes. We are not ready to have genetically modified crops. We do not have the right amount of labs and research so that the research can occur. We have
I'd
less
like to add,
amount of.
yeah, Paul, I just like to add to that it's just not just the research lab. It's just the people also are not very receptive to new things, like to changes, to things that are different, things that they haven't experienced before. So people here, they are they are very scared of the unknown, so to speak.
Yes, sir, they are. Definitely are. If you go to organic farm, you tell them that GMO, you can try that. They would not even, they would, most of them are not even knowing about GMOs or the GM crops and stuff like that.
Okay, moving to the next question. should we fear that use of excessive genetically modified crops can change the flora and fauna of that particular place?
Yes, they definitely can. Because as we discussed about the non-target effects, there is a high chance that the non-target organisms also have some effect on them. So that can definitely change the flora and fauna.
Agreed. Okay, the next question is intake of genetically modified crops can make some mutations in humans?
Uh, See, genetically modified, they can, definitely they can, but it depends. Like supposing I'm having BT cotton or BT corn, sorry, BT corn, it won't make a difference in my body. It would not do any mutations in my body. But there can be some crops which might have this effect, but again, there is no evidence to the same.
Yeah, they might for some crops they might, and for some crops they might not. And then it also depends. For some people they might, for some people they might not. Okay, moving to the next question. And then okay, so Sakshi is asking, genetically modified organisms are feared for creation of superweeds or strong pathogens. So is there any strategy to tackle that?
Uh, See, they are definitely feared for the super weeds. The strategy to tackle that has not been in like strategy to tackle that has not been found yet as of now. But I guess there is some amount of research going on in the WHO thing, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Vanshika, you can stop with the annotations. Another question is how mutation can occur. Please give me an example.
Ma'am, I'm not 110% sure how mutations can occur. Like, there is a high chance that the mutations can occur. There is no proof in, like, there's no theory or there's no proven thing. Like, I already said, most about the threats and benefits, they are mostly theoretical, highly theoretical. We cannot have the practical knowledge unless and until we become researchers or something like that, and we might be working for WHO.
Yeah. Arnav, are you asking about how mutations can occur due to genetically modified plants and animals, or how mutations
Yes,
occur
ma'am,
in
yes.
general? Okay.
No, actually, I'm about asking that the intake of GM crops can occur mutation, na? So how can it be? Is
Okay.
there any example or anything?
I guess I just answered that uh, there is
Can I
no.
add to that?
Sure,
Yeah,
sir.
please.
Yeah, so like mutations, like it is not specific to GM plants or something. So, so like mutations can happen in any organism. These are just errors which happen during DNA copying. So if talking about GM plants, so it's just like normal plants uh, when they are like dispersing their seeds and the plant is growing and uh, the embryo is developing and all that. So it's just mutations that happen during DNA copying. So if, for example, to give an example, so I don't remember the particular gene, but there's a trans and this variant
Yes,
of
This
that,
is
yeah.
and so when the DNA copying happens, so it is like the rate is 1 in 1,000. So the equilibrium, it is regarding the ketones and enol forms. So the the enol, like I don't remember which one, but one of them is more stable. Like one of them is more frequent in occurring, and when the DNA copying is happening, so in the so when the molecular machinery is called, so in that particular moment, so if you take a snapshot, if the okay, Swapna is saying enol form is more stable. Okay, so in that particular scenario, if the keto form is present, so that can be a 1 in 1,000 chance. so then a different gene will be built up, and if the enol form is if the usual enol form is present, so a different gene will build up, so that arises to a mutation. And it is interesting that one is helpful and other one is a toxin. So it just, these minute differences can lead to either a benefit or a threat.
Okay, I have a question. Like, does anyone know which is India's first transgenic crop?
BT cotton?
No,
No.
it's not India's first. It is used in everyday cooking. उसका तेल भी
Brinjal.
होता है. No.
Brinjal.
Brinjal, no. It is used as an oil.
Mustard.
Yes, mustard. Mustard was the first in India's first transgenic crop.
Swapna
And
also
about
answered that
the
in chat box.
and about that, someone asked, no, the how it affects human. There is one which I remember, cancer one. I had read it in WHO's survey itself, that they are sprayed with this glyphosate thing. They're heavily sprayed with it, and due to which they can actually cause cancer. That glyphosate, which is sprayed, can cause cancer in us.
Siddharth is asking, any variety name of that genetically modified mustard oil?
No, I don't think it was only known as mustard as far as I remember.
Yeah, even Sakshi says that it is basically referred to as genetically modified mustard. Just that.
Yeah. In fact, due to these risks and threat, if we see in UK, there are only two places, England and Wales, where cultivation has been allowed. Whereas in other places, it's not been allowed. They have been barred from growing genetically modified crops.
Oh,
They have a lot of laws for it.
damn.
In US, it's known as like I guess 64% of their food is genetically modified now.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, they use a lot of genetically modified corn in the US.
Yeah. Maybe we should also use it. We have a lot of hunger in our country. It can be used in a very good way as well, if the risks are also taken into consideration.
But I don't think Indians will be getting over their paranoia of having pathogenic genes in their food.
To be
True,
honest, that paranoia
We can
includes a
see
lot of-
that in the COVID vaccine about gelatin and pig.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
not just India, even in the US, there's people who are apprehensive about what people are putting in their body. I mean, there was a tweet by Letitia Wright, if you remember, the actress, Black Panther actress.
Yeah, I remember.
Anyway, there's multiple ways to solve hunger in India. Not just not just genetically modified crops. There's a lot of things which can solve hunger.
I saw. Sorry, sir.
Where's that noise coming from? So on a related topic, I gave a webinar. You guys can check it out on the TBS YouTube channel if you want.
Definitely. And you guys know where the links are on the link tree.
There is one which I would like to tell. Like, I saw a video. It was about this family who have now, like, they do not believe in this genetically modified or anything. They even said that if the COVID vaccine comes, they would not get their children and themselves injected with it. He said we would not do this because one of our sons, he got the vaccine for TB or something like that, and he developed a problem due to it, which I'm not very sure of. But they said we would be living alone and we would be living in this place only. They do not even interact with other people. They are like they have their own YouTube channel, I guess, where they tell them how they're living, like how they live, how to survive, and everything like that. And secondly, GMO would be bad for the economy as well, like for especially the farmers. Like they can be good as well, they can be bad as well. Good because yield would be more, bad because it might cost a lot of money in the very initial stage.
Excuse me.
Regarding the farmers, let's just not go there.
No,
True.
the thing you're talking about is there is a research being going on the GMO plants, which is saying that we will use the apomictic technique to preserve all the qualities of a GMO plant in the seed so that it won't dissipate into the other generation, and they can be used regularly without buying new seeds every time they want to harvest or cultivate any crop. So about that, it's going on, not going in India right now. So I don't know how much chances are there that that thing could land in India and effectively work. So yeah, those are-
I guess many of the people would be knowing about this. Broccoli is not like a normal crop. It is also genetically modified.
I'm saying apomixis is normally used. It's a very natural thing. It's very common in biological way of saying. Apomixis is a natural mutation. They are using the same natural mutation from the plant and integrating it with the preferred gene that they want in the plant to be conveyed into, and they are using those desirable. They are finding those samples with the desirable traits, and they're going to be releasing that into the market after testing and further research.
Mm-hmm. I don't know when this would come in India. Why are Indians
No,
not doing this?
no, the point of matter is the research, the money allotted for research is very less. Yeah, it's even
Mhm.
less for education. And what would we go for research? It's just nothing.
True.
Okay, so I don't think it's the problem with the people. It's a problem with the political nature of the country.
Yeah,
Political
that is
will
definitely
would
true.
be the right word. The right word would be the political will is not present in India to do research there. Yeah, it's growing, working. Our college is the same one. Political will is growing slowly and gradually. So our college is one of the examples of it. Baba Atomic Research Center started this in 2009, and it is growing. So one day, hopefully, we can do research and have made in India game.
That is great. At least somewhere it has begun. Like we were just thinking that, like if you talk about people like biotechnology in India, there is not a lot of scope as compared to some other country. If you see Germany, they are doing
Oh,
wonders.
Germans are way ahead of our
Yeah,
country
they are
right now.
doing wonders in biotechnology. I was reading about them. I was like, wow.
The actual thing is the the vision of people of India is quite narrow. It's quite narrow. They
True.
look at very few things through a keyhole in the whole door, and they just don't open the door. They look through the keyhole and see that little thing. Never open the door again. So it's just about opening the door. The education is about opening the door rather than making them look through the keyhole. It's not working here right now. The education is going on is not the way it is required for the scientific temper. But let's see future. Let's see what the future goes for us.
True, sir. That is very true.
I'm not a sir, please. I'm also first year undergraduate.
So don't mind. I actually I have the habit of saying sir even to the first years.
Okay.
Ma'am, do we have any more questions?
No, I think
Because
we
I
are
haven't opened my chat, but it shows 39.
Yeah, we are done with the questions.
Okay.
People are discussing about, I mean, some people can't unmute, so they are discussing things that we are discussing verbally on the chat box. Like Siddharth is saying that mindset and also least chance of approach to the research fields.
Yeah. And Sakshi had a question. So we can say that the HYV are genetically modified, right? That's what she says in the chat box.
Yeah, that was the
So
last
I was
question.
wondering if
HYV.
okay,
Can you tell me the full form?
I have no idea. She just wrote
It's
HYV.
high yield something
High
to
yielding
definite.
varieties,
Yielding
seeds,
varieties.
HYV seeds, the ones used in Green Revolution in India.
High, like your question is it genetically modified?
Yeah.
They were known as miracle seeds as far as I remember. They are not genetically modified. Because whenever we talk about genetically modified, we never talk about high yielding variety crops, because that was done earlier. At that point, we didn't do this genetic engineering kind of a thing.
Yes, it was a natural variation. The natural variation variant we took, which was you know noted or given a tag of high yielding variety among all the germplasm they have.
Yeah,
That,
it was a miracle seed. I remember. It was like, wow. Like at that point of time, I don't think India would have been like, if that would have happened due to genetic variation or genetic engineering, then
it was
definitely
just
India
due
would
to
have
natural,
been.
no, it was just due to natural selection.
Yeah,
They have nothing to do with genetic variation or GMOs. No, it wasn't done
we had
unprecedented.
not tampered it.
No. Before the semi-dwarf varieties of anything, it was done by Norman E. Borlaug. Nothing was genetically modified before that. Now, no one did that before Norman E. Borlaug.
Right. So I think we are done with the questions. There are no more in the chat box. And I'd like to thank you, Porvi, for delivering such an enlightening webinar. It was a really good session for all of us. I hope the audience had a good time. And also, I'd like to thank the audience for joining in.